Last week, I interviewed Joe Exotic. He called in from a federal prison where he is locked in a cage. It is important to remember that Joe Exotic is a human. He is a man with a beating heart. He is a real person just like you and me. He spends his days in prison without freedom. He spends his days unable to enjoy the beauties of life, the promise of America. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet regarding Joe Exotic's case and why the Tiger King is actually in prison. The man gave the world so much humor and entertainment during the pandemic. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to get to know Joe Exotic just a little bit. I can tell you that he is hilarious. He is in fact funny, and he is very kind. And he clearly believes that he should not be locked in a cage. Today, we're going to get to the bottom of just that question. Should Joe Exotic, the Tiger King, be rotting in prison? And is he in fact an innocent man? I'd like to welcome Joe Exotic's lawyer to the program, John Pierce. So John, thank you so much for joining us on the program. What were Joe Exotic's original charges when this all started?
Sure. So Joe was charged with essentially two different types of charges. He was hit with two alleged murder for hire charges for allegedly, even though he didn't do it, attempting to hire somebody to kill Carol Baskin. And then the second set of charges, which also should have never been brought, related to the manner in which he euthanized 5 tigers that he actually got permission from the USDA to euthanize in the manner that he did. And there were also some paperwork allegations relating to the transfer of some exotic animals, which also were wrongfully brought. But those were the universe of charges that he got hit with.
And Mr. Pierce, from the beginning, how many years was Mr. Exotic facing?
Yeah, so, I don't know what the statutory maximum was if you were to add up, sort of consecutive sentences and all the different charges, but he was certainly facing decades in prison, and he did get hit with, I believe, 22 years in prison was the original sentence.
So I'm so glad that you joined us today because we did recently have Joe Exotic on the show, and my audience wants to clear up the legal side of this and find out what's really happening here and find out if we do in fact have an innocent man rotting in prison right now. So my question is this. There's a lot of rumors swirling on the internet about this alleged hitman, right, who apparently hated Joe Exotic. Has he changed his statements along the way?
Yeah, so you nailed you hit it right on the head there. Essentially what has happened is that several of the witnesses who were the government's main witnesses at trial, including the alleged hitman, have completely recanted their testimony. They have done that in writing. They were actually recorded on video doing that by Joe's prior lawyer, John Phillips, who got some great, new evidence. And so yes, the government's case has essentially been gutted because virtually all of their key witnesses have just changed their story, and they've admitted that this was a setup to frame Joe. If you watch The Tiger King, Joe's, obviously is a little bit of a character, and he says some things that are, for dramatic effect and whatnot, and he certainly made his share of enemies. And so, what happened was he was set up. He was framed, and the government took him to trial. They shouldn't have, and they got their conviction, and now we're trying to get that overturned because he definitely is innocent.
And we're going to get into that appeal, and we're going to get into a possible presidential pardon. John Pierce, I have to ask you, though, when you say he was framed, he was set up, and Joe says the same thing, walk me through that. In other words, somebody approached him and said, give me X amount of thousands of dollars, and I will have Carol Baskin killed. Is it as simple as that?
No, it's really not. And I'm not going to be, and I'm sure this will be a little bit frustrating for you. And it always is when I'm interviewed about pending cases. I do need to be a little bit mindful of, not really getting into the nitty gritty of the factual details while the case is pending. All this is going to be fleshed out in front of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. But basically, there was an allegation that he had offered a certain amount of money for an individual to go to Florida to kill Carol Baskin. That's inaccurate. That never happened. That individual never went to Florida. The plan was never to go to Florida, and that actually never happened. And we now have audio recordings and text messages that clearly demonstrate this. And again, fundamentally, the most important thing being that this individual has actually recanted and has admitted that the entire thing was a setup.
And what I'm really trying to get to today, John Pierce, is whether he's a celebrity or not, whether he's a Tiger King or not, is there, in fact, an innocent man sitting in prison as we speak, as we're enjoying, a beautiful day? You're in Florida, I'm out here in Arizona, and the Tiger King is sitting in prison with no freedom. So there's been a lot of talk from Joe Exotic on this program about the FBI informants, et cetera, et cetera. What exactly is the FBI's role in all of this?
Yeah, and so one thing to preface that is you may be aware, I represent dozens of January 6th defendants with respect to what happened at the Capitol, and of course, there are lots of questions about the FBI's involvement with respect to that, and so certainly it's something that I'm really well tuned into with respect to the way that organization operates. From a general standpoint, there was some involvement by some FBI agents that got involved, I believe, at the behest of Carol Baskin, and they made some some undercover recordings. They had some interactions with some of the individuals who were clearly enemies of Joe Exotic. And I don't want to go as far as to say it was quite the degree of the FBI's involvement, for example, in the Gretchen Whitmer case, but that's the type of thing that it starts to bring to mind is whether this was something that was sort of completely hatched at the behest of the FBI and the enemies of Joe Exotic. So there was definitely FBI involvement. We're looking more closely at that. From what we know right now, it was not good for sure.
Of course, you're referring to Michigan's Governor Whitmer that had FBI informants involved somehow in her alleged kidnapping. So I want to ask you about Joe Exotic, the man, and about his financial situation. Obviously, we know people like you, attorneys, lawyers, they cost money. It costs lots of money. I'm assuming, on a daily basis, there's paperwork, there's all kinds of stuff that you have to do on his behalf. He was this, major phenomenon, and he's a international celebrity. But in talking to Joe, he was like, listen, the Tiger King wasn't really my thing. It wasn't my baby. They just took my footage and used it, and it blew up. So is Joe Exotic a wealthy man? How is he paying for all these legal expenses?
Yeah, I mean, he is not a wealthy man. I mean, he's essentially broke, I believe. So this is one of the most interesting things to me when I first got involved in this. I had some knowledge of the Tiger King show just from, hearing about it and being aware of it as a cultural phenomenon that really, hit during the COVID times when everybody was at home and binge watching shows on Netflix and everything. But the fact of the matter is that, he was in prison already during the time that show was produced and put on Netflix. And so everybody kind of assumes that Joe Exotic, being as well known as he is, almost a cultural global icon after the Netflix show, obviously made millions of dollars and was jet setting around and things like that. That's completely inaccurate. He didn't make a dime from the show. That's actually something that we're taking a close look at from a civil standpoint. Is taking a look at the folks who produced the show, who gave his footage over to the production company and to Netflix to make all the money that they made on the show. It was essentially stolen from him, the footage that was given to Netflix. And so he didn't make a dime. He was in prison the whole time. And as a matter of fact, he hadn't even seen the show until when we went to visit him one time in Fort Worth at the federal penitentiary there. We loaded up the show on a laptop and we sat down with him and we watched the first season so he could kind of walk us through understanding some of the facts involved. But he hadn't even seen the show before that point because he was in prison the entire time.
He talked about on this program last week, one of the first times he realized that he was like an international celebrity was he was being transported from one prison to another prison in the back of a car. And he said, like, everybody on the highway was like snapping photos of him. And he's like, what the hell's going on here? He came to the realization, like, oh my gosh, this show got huge. When you visit him in prison and you see him in the flesh, take my audience kind of into that prison. Is he is he being treated fairly? Do the guards look at him as like some sort of a celebrity? Are the inmates going after him because he does have that big name? Or is he kind of, looked up to in there?
Yeah, so basically, when we visit him, we essentially meet him in a conference room that he's brought to. So we don't get a tremendous insight into the details of that. But certainly everybody knows who he is. He is in a what's called a federal medical center, which is essentially a federal prison that has some ability to treat inmates that have various kinds of health related issues. So I don't think that the security is quite as tight as a maximum level or medium level federal prison. So, but it's certainly not pleasant in those places, to be sure. And there are lots of issues that come along with being incarcerated in a federal prison. But my understanding from from talking to him is that again, while it's certainly not pleasant, we want to get him out as soon as possible. That look, some of the guards are better than others. The folks we dealt with seem to be just doing their job and doing what they had to do. But yeah, we didn't really get a chance to see him with respect to other prisoners or anything. I mean, I do think that one thing he did mention is when the families come on a certain day to visit the prisoners, he certainly gets asked to take a lot of pictures. So yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, I think he's he's got that celebrity status, and so some folks think that's kind of cool. But it's, again, being in any kind of federal penitentiary is not going to be the most fun thing in life.
And we're speaking to John Pierce right now, Joe Exotic's lawyer. And John, obviously, Joe Exotic has battled cancer while in there, so a lot of health issues. Talk to me about his mental state. I mean, when I spoke to him, he seemed pissed off, for the lack of a better term, and he even said, off the air and on there, like, what the hell am I doing here? So how is his mental state? Is he down? Is he down, depressed? Or is he more upbeat on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question. So, the phrase that I would use to describe it is really kind of righteous indignation. I think the more and more that he learns and that we learn about the actual evidence in his case, the more it's just the notion that he is in prison for as long as he has been and he's supposed to be going forward is just really it's just really outrageous. Having said that, he definitely has what I would call a warrior spirit. I mean, he's a fighter, and I think he goes through good days and bad days in terms of his mindset, which is not to be unexpected. I think it is very helpful to him to know that he's found some lawyers who are really going to fight hard on his behalf. I think that, without naming names, I mean, I think he's gone through some lawyers who have not really fought as hard for him as they really should have, and, got paid a lot of money for that. One thing I mentioned in terms of the financial aspect of this is that, yeah, look, obviously good lawyers, cost money. They cost a lot of money. What we have done, as we've done with our January 6th cases, is we have reduced our rates as much as humanly possible while still being able to keep the lights on. And, he does whatever he can to raise some money, but we definitely need help. And so we've set up a Give, Send, Go. It's at freejoeexotic.com. If folks go to that, they can get to the Give, Send, Go. But this is going to be something that, in the long haul is definitely going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get through the appeal process and then to go to litigate an entirely new trial, which is what we're asking the courts to give us the right to do. That's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars easily. And so, we definitely need a lot of help. And, we're asking folks for all the help we can get.
And before I let you go today, John Pierce, I want to get to, if people are watching right now and they've followed this case and they've read all the news online and they've listened to my interview with Joe Exotic, you can go to freejoeexotic.com and you're saying you can donate actual dollars that will go to his legal fund.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a give, send, go. So there's two ways to get to it. You could go to the give, send, go domain, and after the backslash, it says free Joe Exotic. Or if you go to the website www.freejoeexotic.com, that is set up to be redirected,
Okay.
directly to that give, send, go site. And so that is set up by the NCLU, the National Constitutional Law Union, which is a 501c4 that I've set up to help raise funds for folks who are facing situations, litigations that relate to the violation of their constitutional rights. And so, yes, I mean, any money that is donated there will go directly to applying to his legal fees and the hard costs associated with his case. So
And,
that is 100% of those dollars, aside from the fees, the Give Send Go fees affiliated with the with that platform, will go towards his legal fees and his costs. Yes.
and I will say that Joe, said in our interview last week, he's not in the best health. He's struggling with some things right now, health-wise. So how many years is left on his sentence?
Yeah, I believe it's right about 10 years
Right.
that's left, is my understanding. I think he's been in for about 7 or 8 years. And then, with some of the, First Step Act programs and that sort of thing that can get you slightly earlier release, I think he's got another at least 10 years in there, if not more. And so, yeah, I mean, look, his mindset is that if we don't get him out of there, he could and most likely will die in prison. And so, that's one of the reasons that we're fighting so hard to get him out of there. And again, like you said earlier on, it's always kind of interesting and a conversation starter to be, representing sort of celebrities and folks that everybody knows who they are. But it's not about that for us, certainly. It's about the fact that we strongly believe that there is an innocent man, completely innocent man that's rotting away in federal prison that we want to get out of there.
So it seems to me, at the end of the day, there's only two ways that you're going to get Joe Exotic out of prison. Number one is you win this appeal and everything gets overthrown and then he gets out of prison. And I'm putting this in simple terms because I'm not a lawyer. Number two is a presidential pardon. So I want you to focus on the pardon.
Sure.
Are you able to aggressively, actively talk to the Harris campaign, talk to the Trump campaign, whoever our next president is, and state your case? Like, how does that go? Or is that a battle that's being fought through interviews like this in the media?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily sort of a black and white, straightforward process. I mean, as you may or may not know, I represented George Papadopoulos in the Russia hoax situation, and ultimately we were able to get him pardoned by President Trump. I mean, obviously it's within complete control of the executive, of the president, and a lot of times these pardons tend to happen in one fell swoop at the end of a term. In this situation, I'm a little bit skeptical that the Biden-Harris administration would pardon him. I mean, they should, and I hope that they do. But Joe's been pretty vocal with respect to his politics. I'm pretty vocal with respect to my politics, and I don't think that the Biden-Harris regime is the biggest fan of either one of us. And so I do think it's much more likely, if President Trump gets back in office, that we'll have a shot with President Trump. He is aware of Joe Exotic's situation. I believe that Don Jr. Either had Joe on his show or certainly, was talking about the situation whenever there was a big push to try to get him pardoned the first time around, which just didn't happen. But I do think it's much more likely with President Trump. And so, right now we're just going to focus like a laser beam on the appellate process, because that is so time consuming. And, you really want to show that you're taking all the steps you can in the legal process first before you go for that pardon. And then, we'll see what happens with that. And then, whatever happens to the election, we'll put a big push on if we have to get a pardon. I just tend to think it's going to be more likely from a practical standpoint if President Trump gets back into office than the current administration.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious. You could see Trump just getting a question from the press at a press conference about Joe Exotic, and he said, well, you know what? I think we're going to do that. I mean, he makes decisions so fast, and I do know that Don Jr. Is very, very aware of this case, and hopefully, they're looking at this thing and they can make their own judgment. And like I said at the top, if there is in fact an innocent man rotting in prison right now, as we enjoy all the beautiful freedoms in America, then something needs to be done about this. John Pierce, Joe Exotic's lawyer, thank you so much for chiming in on this case. We're going to be following. I hope to have you back on the program. And again, you can go to freejoeexotic.com if you'd like to support. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you very much, Billy. Look forward to being on again.
All right, we'll see you soon.
All right.
My name is Billy Harfosh, broadcasting from Dave Pratt's Star Worldwide Networks. There you go. You wanted to follow up. You wanted to get into the legal system on all of this. I have to tell you, I'm going to say it once again. I've had some private, messages back and forth with the Tiger King, and how do I say this? My mom said this. She said, you know what? I don't know if he's guilty or not, but he grows on you. He's very charismatic. He's very funny. And there's kind of a sweetness about him. And I know I'm going to catch a lot of smoke for saying that, but there's a sweetness about Joe Exotic. And so I would encourage you, do your own research. Look at this case. You just heard directly from the horse's mouth, right from his lawyer. He believes that this is a free man, and a lot of people out there do. A lot of shady stuff happening with this case. Go to freejoeexotic.com if you would like to contribute to his legal fund. You can find me on Instagram at Billy Harfosh. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know right now what you think about that interview, and we'll see you next time.